I still remember that electrifying moment as if it were splashed in neon across my very soul. The moment I realized my wife believed I'd never uncover her secret affair, until one fateful evening, fueled by raw determination and a mounting storm of betrayal, I sent irrefutable screenshots of her intimate messages to her family. In those first 100 heartbeats, every promise of trust and the future we once dreamed of together shattered into 1,000 shards of disbelief and heartbreak. The cold, digital evidence glowed on my screen like a brutal revelation, and I felt a fierce resolve surge within me. I would no longer be kept in the dark. I would reclaim my dignity, expose the lies, and force the truth into the light. For years, I had believed that our marriage was a safe haven, a delicate balance of unspoken trust, shared secrets, and quiet promises of forever. I had invested my heart, my soul, and countless hours building a future with her. Every smile, every whispered assurance had convinced me that we were partners in a lifelong journey. I trusted her implicitly, never suspecting that behind the tender moments and affectionate glances lay hidden betrayals. I even dismissed small, fleeting doubts, those moments when her phone buzzed with hushed tones, or when her eyes darted away in conversation, as mere quirks of a busy life. But all those minor anomalies coalesced into a devastating truth I could no longer ignore. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when I found myself alone in our study, the only light coming from the soft glow of my laptop screen. I had decided to catch up on some emails, unaware that I was about to uncover a secret that would upend everything. As I absent-mindedly glanced at a series of notifications, one particular conversation caught my attention, a string of messages that, at first, looked innocent enough. But then I saw the tone shift. The messages became more intimate, laced with flirtation and promises that I knew could not be meant for me. My hands began to tremble as I scrolled through screenshots that showed a side of my wife I had never imagined existed, a side that belonged to a clandestine relationship with a man whose name I had never heard her mention in all our years together. At first, disbelief held me captive. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, as each new message piled on the evidence of betrayal. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing a torrent of emotions that I could neither control nor contain. I felt shock, anger, and an overwhelming sense of hurt, but amid that maelstrom, a quiet, steely resolve began to form. I realized that if I was going to reclaim the truth, and my own self-respect, I could not allow these secrets to fester in silence. I had to confront the betrayal head-on, not only for my own sake but to ensure that the deception was laid bare for everyone who mattered. In the days that followed, I wrestled with a tumult of conflicting emotions. I would replay the images over and over in my mind, each screenshot a brutal reminder of the hidden life she had led behind my back. I questioned every small detail of our shared past, the furtive glances during dinner parties, the secretive phone calls, and the subtle moments when her smile faltered as if burdened by guilt. The realization that she had meticulously hidden this affair, convinced herself that I'd never find out, filled me with a profound sense of betrayal. And yet, in that same moment of raw pain, I discovered a spark of empowerment, a determination to no longer be a passive victim in my own life. I began to document every detail in a journal, pouring out my thoughts and emotions in long, feverish entries. I wrote about the dissonance between the woman I thought I knew and the person revealed by those digital confessions. I chronicled the steady accumulation of evidence, the mounting weight of deception, and the painful clarity that came with it. Each word on those pages was a small act of defiance, a declaration that I was no longer willing to be controlled by lies. I vowed to myself that I would bring the truth to light, not in a moment of impulsive anger, but through a measured, deliberate act that would force her family and ultimately the world to confront the reality of her betrayal. In that solitude, as I stared at the glowing screen and felt the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue, I made a decision. I would gather all the irrefutable evidence, screenshots of every text, every whispered promise, every secret conversation, and send them to her family. I wasn't doing it for revenge, I was doing it to reclaim my dignity and to force the truth into the open. I knew that once her family saw what I had uncovered, there would be no denying the reality of her actions. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. I understood that this step would irrevocably change everything. It would shatter the facade she had so carefully maintained and expose the hidden fractures in our life together. That decision, made in a moment of fierce clarity, marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I would no longer be a silent bystander to my own suffering. As I composed that email, attaching every screenshot, I felt a mixture of trepidation and relief. I recalled all the quiet moments when I had suspected something was amiss, all the warnings I had ignored in the name of love and trust. Now the evidence was undeniable and I could no longer remain silent. With trembling fingers and a resolute heart I pressed send, and in that instant the secret was out. I knew that her family's reaction would be unpredictable, shock, anger, perhaps even disbelief, but I was prepared to face it all. I had taken a decisive step toward reclaiming my future, toward ensuring that I would never again be defined by someone else's deception. The night that followed was a blur of restless sleep and constant replays of that moment when the truth had been unleashed. I felt a surge of emotions, bitter anger mingled with a quiet satisfaction, the knowledge that I had finally taken control of the narrative of my life. I had chosen to stand by my own truth, and in doing so, I had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. As the first light of a new day crept through the window, I knew that there was no going back. I had laid bare the truth and now I would have to face the consequences. But I also knew that this was the beginning of my liberation, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, to redefine my identity, and to move forward with an unshakable sense of self-worth. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to embrace it all. In that moment of raw, painful clarity, I vowed that I would never again allow deceit to diminish my worth. I was prepared to reclaim every piece of my future, one determined step at a time. In the days following the moment I hit send on that email, I found myself caught in a relentless storm of conflicting emotions and unexpected consequences. The digital evidence of her betrayal was now out in the open, and the reaction from her family began to trickle in, first as whispered disbelief and then as overt expressions of shock, anger, and sorrow. I spent the first few nights in a state of disorientation, barely able to sleep as my mind replayed every detail of that fateful evening. I wondered how it would all unfold and whether exposing her secret life would finally bring me the closure, and perhaps even the validation I so desperately craved. In those early hours, I isolated myself in my study. The only light came from the computer screen and I sat there, eyes heavy with fatigue, reviewing my sent email over and over again. Each reread was a reminder of the painful truth. Every sneaky text, every hidden message, was now indisputable evidence that I had been deceived. Despite the torrent of emotion, a quiet resolve began to emerge. I knew that this was only the beginning of a long, complicated journey toward reclaiming my self-worth and redefining my future. I had taken that irreversible step, and now I would have to face the aftermath with courage, even if it meant confronting the family I once trusted. The fallout was immediate and raw. Over the next few days, I received a series of responses that ranged from shock to outright condemnation of her actions. Some of her relatives called me, their voices trembling with a mix of pity and anger. Others sent messages of support, expressing disbelief that she could keep such a secret hidden for so long. I recall one conversation vividly. My uncle, who had always been one of her staunch defenders, called me late one night. His tone was a strange blend of disappointment and concern as he said, "I never imagined it would come to this. We always thought you were the one who kept our family together." His words stung, not because they questioned my integrity, but because they confirmed that the truth had indeed fractured the facade of our once close family. I realized that by exposing her betrayal, I was not only reclaiming my own dignity but also shaking the foundations of a family that had long turned a blind eye to her deceit. As the emails and phone calls flowed in, I started to feel a complex mixture of vindication and isolation. Part of me was relieved to finally have the truth out in the open, to no longer carry the crushing weight of secrets. But another part of me ached with loneliness, the realization that the very people I had trusted to be my extended family now viewed me through a lens of bitterness and regret. I spent hours walking through the quiet streets at night, the cool air on my face reminding me that every step forward was both a loss and a gain. Each step was a deliberate act of defiance, a movement toward a future where I would no longer be defined by someone else's hidden lies. In the midst of this emotional chaos, I also had to confront the practical repercussions of my actions. Her family's reaction wasn't limited to private phone calls. It soon spilled over into public forums. At a family gathering a few days later, I could sense that things were different. Conversations that once flowed easily were now punctuated by uneasy glances and whispered side comments. I watched as my wife's relatives exchanged disapproving looks, and even though I wasn't at the center of the storm, I felt every judgment like a blow. It was as if the entire dynamic had shifted overnight. I wasn't sure whether they were angry with me for exposing her or saddened by the ruin it had brought upon our family, but the silence in those moments spoke volumes. The pain of rejection mingled with a growing resolve that I was, indeed, ready to walk away from everything that had once tied me down. That public confrontation, though painful, became a turning point in my internal journey. I began to see that the betrayal wasn't solely about the act itself, but about the failure of trust and the neglect of what I valued most: my integrity, my self-respect, and my right to know the truth. In therapy sessions that followed, I recounted the overwhelming mix of emotions I experienced when her secret came to light. My therapist helped me untangle the knots of anger and sorrow, guiding me to understand that while the truth was a bitter pill to swallow, it was also the catalyst for my personal growth. I learned that forgiving someone wasn't about excusing their actions. It was about liberating myself from the chains of resentment that threatened to keep me anchored in pain. Every session, every tear shed during those quiet, vulnerable moments, helped me build a new foundation for my future. I realized that I had been so focused on preserving the illusion of our shared life that I had ignored the quiet signals of discontent. Signals that, in retrospect, were warning me of the betrayal to come. The images of those screenshots, now permanently etched in my mind, became not just reminders of her deception but also the spark that ignited my resolve to reclaim my life. I began to redefine my values: honesty, self-reliance, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths head-on. Slowly, the anger that once threatened to consume me transformed into a steady determination to chart my own course, independent of her choices or anyone else's judgment. As I started rebuilding my inner world, I also looked to my professional life for affirmation. I immersed myself in work with an intensity that was both cathartic and transformative. I began taking on challenging projects at the hospital. Each operation, every critical decision in the operating room, served as a reminder that my worth was not defined by the betrayal of a partner, but by the strength and skill I brought to my work every day. My colleagues began to notice a shift, a newfound assertiveness and an unwavering focus that set me apart. I was no longer just a quiet observer in the background. I was emerging as a leader, as someone who had turned personal heartbreak into professional excellence. During one particularly grueling week, when the emotional weight of the past threatened to overwhelm me, I led a high-stakes surgical procedure that had been mired in uncertainty. The stakes were high, and every second in the operating room was critical. As I worked with precision and calm determination, I could feel the adrenaline washing away the remnants of my sorrow. That surgery was a turning point, a moment when the dual forces of grief and resolve merged into a powerful drive to succeed. When the operation concluded successfully, the applause of my team wasn't just a recognition of my technical skill, it was a silent, triumphant affirmation of my resilience. I realized then that my ability to transform pain into performance was a gift, a reminder that I was capable of greatness, regardless of the betrayal that had once defined my personal life. At the same time, I began to channel my emotions into creative expression. I returned to writing with a fervor that allowed me to process the flood of thoughts and feelings. I started a private blog where I recounted my journey in raw, unfiltered detail, from the moment I discovered the screenshots to the myriad emotions that followed and the gradual emergence of a new, empowered identity. The act of writing became my sanctuary, a space where I could articulate the complexities of betrayal, grief, and ultimately, the fierce determination to rise above it all. The supportive responses I received from readers, stories of their own struggles, messages of solidarity and encouragement, provided a profound sense of community and a reminder that I was not alone in this battle. Their voices echoed in my mind, reinforcing the belief that my journey of healing was part of a larger tapestry of resilience. Socially, I began to reconnect with those who had always seen the real me, the person beneath the surface who was capable, passionate, and driven by an unyielding desire to do what was right. I met with close friends and family members who had been there long before the betrayal, and in our conversations I found solace and affirmation. We discussed the signs I had once overlooked, the subtle hints of her divided attention, and how the truth, once revealed, could no longer be contained. These interactions were bittersweet, a blend of sorrow for what had been lost and hope for what lay ahead. In those intimate gatherings, I discovered that the support of those who truly cared could be a powerful antidote to isolation. Their reassurance bolstered my resolve, reminding me that my worth was intrinsic and that the journey toward healing was one we could all share. With every passing day, as the raw edges of betrayal softened into the wisdom of experience, I began to lay the groundwork for a new future. I set clear, ambitious goals for both my career and my personal growth, outlining a roadmap that would guide me from the pain of the past to the promise of a brighter tomorrow. I meticulously planned every step, from securing my finances and expanding my professional network to investing in opportunities that aligned with my renewed vision for life. Each goal was a declaration that I was reclaiming my future, that my success would be defined not by the shadows of betrayal, but by the strength of my own determination. In quiet moments of reflection, Late at night, as I sat on my balcony under a sky studded with stars, I found myself drawing strength from the journey itself. I recalled the countless hours spent reviewing bank statements, the painful rereadings of messages that confirmed my worst fears, and the slow, steady process of converting betrayal into a stepping stone for growth. Each memory, though laden with sorrow, had become a building block in the edifice of my new identity. I had learned to embrace my vulnerability, to see the scars not as marks of failure, but as badges of honor that testified to my ability to overcome even the deepest wounds. As the months turned into a year, the transformation within me grew undeniable. My professional successes, once mere aspirations, now stood as concrete evidence of my resilience. I received accolades, secured promotions, and forged partnerships that elevated my status in ways I had never anticipated. Every achievement was a counterpoint to the pain I had endured, a reminder that I was not defined by the betrayal, but by my unwavering commitment to my own dreams. My financial future, carefully rebuilt through prudent investments and strategic planning, began to shine with the promise of stability and growth. And in every moment, whether in the quiet solitude of my study or in the vibrant chaos of a busy hospital, I carried within me the unshakable knowledge that I was enough. I also began to see that my journey was not mine alone. It was part of a larger narrative, a universal struggle against the forces that try to diminish our worth. I started sharing my story more openly, speaking at local events and engaging with others who had faced similar betrayals. In these exchanges, I discovered a profound truth, that by reclaiming my voice, I was not only healing myself but also empowering others to do the same. The community that formed around my experiences was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a mosaic of individuals united by the shared belief that even in our darkest moments, there lies an opportunity for rebirth. In the final stretch of my journey, as I prepared to take the next bold step toward my future, I reflected on the lessons learned along the way. The betrayal that had once shattered my world had also ignited a fire within me, a fire that transformed despair into determination and pain into purpose. I recognized that every moment of anguish had been a crucible, forging a strength that was both quiet and unyielding. I had come to understand that the journey toward healing was not a straight path but a winding road, filled with setbacks and small victories alike. And as I looked forward to the future, a future built on the foundations of hard-won resilience and unwavering self-belief, I felt a deep, abiding sense of gratitude for every trial I had faced. Now, standing at the precipice of a new chapter, I know that my destiny is mine to create. The echo of that painful night, when I uncovered her secret affair and exposed the truth to her family, still resonates within me, but it no longer holds me captive. Instead, it propels me forward with a fierce, unyielding determination to build a life defined by my own dreams, unclouded by betrayal. I step into tomorrow with confidence, clarity, and an unshakable resolve that I will never again allow someone else's deceit to dictate my worth. Every challenge I face, every moment of doubt, only fuels my ambition to rise higher. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a mind sharpened by the fires of adversity, I move forward, one courageous, determined step at a time, into a future that is entirely, unequivocally mine.